All right, guys. Hey, welcome back. This is Brandon with Craft Quad Cities, and we're sitting here today at Knox County Brewing. I am joined by Sarah Hansen, one of the co-owners of Knox County Brewing. And what we're basically doing right now is we're going to kick off the Women's International Brew Day,
Right.
which happens in March. So I decided to get with some of the great females that are in the brewing industry in the area and just kind of talk to them about what got them interested in brewing, what they currently do in it, and just the impact of women that's going to have on the industry. So, Sarah, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, you are co-owner of
That's
Knox
right.
County Brewing.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah. Matthew and I, my husband is Matthew. If you've not been, I know you've been, so you've met my husband. But Matthew and I started Knox County Brewing Company back in October of 2018. Took us about a year to get the concept kind of worked out, source our materials, kind of find out what our values were going to be. So we started, I'm going to say, in early 2018. We had some consultants from Austin, which is where we're from, that were helping us kind of set the plan up a little bit. And then we opened in October of 2018. So just celebrated 2 years. It's been a great 2 years. Also, this year's been super interesting. Building a lot of resiliency in the way that we run the business this year.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of challenges in general with that, but just for newer places that are, only a couple of years old, they haven't been quite as established and rooted yet.
Yeah.
And you guys had your first year and you're like, yes, this is great. And then second year, it's like, boom, you're hit with a lot of challenges.
Again. It's funny because so often we find ourselves referring, frankly, back to the breweries that were dealing with prohibition during that era, because the ones that survived that challenge were the ones that diversified the most. And so that's probably been the number one thing in our conversations as co-owners right now, is how to build a resilient brewery through change, right? Because change is always going to be something that we deal with. But this has been global, right? This has been a huge thing. And so we look back to history, and we've done that. We found ourselves doing that a lot this year, looking to how some of those, this industry in particular, dealt with a really big challenge, almost 100 years ago.
Yeah, no, for sure. So what made you guys interested in starting a brewery here in Galesburg?
Yeah, so Matthew and I had worked in what we call social entrepreneurship. It's a more common term now. In Austin, Texas, for about 15 years. We did that in all different sectors, so faith-based, non-faith-based, not-for-profit, both global, local, just all kinds of, we had our fingers in all kinds of different things, doing a similar type of work, okay? And so then in 2015, we moved back to Illinois after having spent 15 years in Texas, to kind of take a little bit of a breather from the city. I mean, the city's a great place to learn, it's a great place to be, to function in business, like I said, both profit and not-for-profit, but it's exhausting too, right? And so we moved back to Illinois, which is where I grew up, about 30 minutes west of here. That's where I grew up in Warren County.
Great.
And so we moved back here to sort of reset, let our kids have a breather, let ourselves have a breather. Matthew was finishing school. I took a job here locally. And after about 2 years, when we were finished, we frankly thought we were going to leave. We thought we'd maybe go do a little bit of job hunting in another large city, perhaps somewhere out west, and just kind of be on our way, and have appreciated the rural countryside for what it was. But the truth is, after about 2 years here, we'd been on the scene long enough to learn about the state of rural America, the way that the loss of manufacturing jobs has affected it, the way that, we've got a little bit of economy issues in the state of Illinois, whether it depends on if you talk to somebody from the city or somebody from the country on what that is actually, but just to say that there's tension between the two is true, I think, universally. And so because of that type of work that we had done in Austin, establishing nonprofits, helping build volunteer networks, setting up low-income housing, things like that, again, both domestically and globally, we thought, well, here we are in the middle of my birthplace, the place where we got married. Potentially, maybe there's something to be done here. And not to say that we thought that we could change it, but we thought, we've done a little bit of this kind of work before. Maybe there's something we could do while we're still here, because we didn't have a clear path forward. And so this is about 2016. We're starting to ask these questions. And so we did start doing a little bit of research, like any good new business owner would want to do.
Sure.
What industries, and so we started looking at what industries were making a difference economically in the state of Illinois. And so I say that because our history had always been in nonprofit, right? So Austin has the most nonprofits per capita of any city in the United States.
Really?
So it was
Okay.
ripe ground
Yes.
for that type of an establishment. Resources are a little bit harder to come by in rural America, Illinois or wherever. They're just a little bit harder to come by in rural America because you have fewer people, right? So it's just a little bit smaller pot. And so we decided at that point that we needed it to be a revenue-bearing industry, whatever it was. We weren't going to try to go through the nonprofit sector. We'd try to found a for-profit business. So we were looking at industries that are making a difference in the state of Illinois. And most folks, especially in Illinois, know that Chicago, I think, has the most breweries of any city in the U.S. It's right up there near the top.
Yes, I think they are.
And as well, at that time when we were looking, I can't speak to it as much now, but when we were looking, many of the laws and the tax in the state of Illinois were quite favorable to craft breweries. Okay, again, some of that's changed in the last few years, not necessarily for the bad. I can only speak to what we were looking at, what we were looking
Right.
for a few years ago.
Yep.
And so, finding that to be true, finding it to be that Illinois was a craft beer friendly state, and also already having had this love for craft beer, which I've skipped over that part of the story, but breweries started popping up in Austin probably 7-8 years ago. Hey, that looks fun, let's go. That's kind of where the love for that environment was born.
Sure.
And so we started visiting with our kids. We really loved the way that it's a super inclusive community, as well as a community that loves the art of what they're doing. And so those two things, a personal interest there with what's something that we already loved, combined with the fact that it was making an economic impact in the state, is really what inspired us to start this brewery. So that was a super long answer to that question, but
No, that's great.
it's a winding road.
So you're saying you started a brewery and you had actually had the beer before. You didn't want to just totally risk it and say, you know what, I've never had craft beer. Let's go do this.
Yeah.
No,
we
that's the
actually
case
had-
with a lot of times.
We actually had. We'd never. We'd done a little bit of home brewing prior to that, which is
Okay,
also one of
great.
those things
Yeah.
too, because people kind of want to know, well, how'd you learn how to make it? And the truth is, it's trial by fire. Like the
Yep.
first big batch of beer that Matthew and my son Ashton made was it took him 18 hours. There's a lot of tears and but it was a great beer. It turned out good. But it's a lot of trial by fire. You know, we
Yes.
knew we loved the product because we saw what the leaders in the craft beer industry were trying to showcase as a way of doing business that's a little bit different, right? And so that was what really got us to the possibility. Plus the fact that, you know, we live here in an area where there's a lot of opportunity, frankly. It's really inexpensive to start a business in small town America. We've got a great city government that we get to work with. And so there's just really a lot of opportunity, some hurdles that weren't as high as they might have been in another place.
Sure. That's great. So let's get into some of the more details about what you do on a daily basis.
Sure.
So we know this is it's a family-run business.
Absolutely.
You guys are in here
All day.
probably a lot more than what people would want to be at a
Yeah,
business, but
yeah.
you guys do run it as a family. So what do you do on a daily basis?
So Matthew is the head brewer, and I actually have recently taken on commercializing our kombucha brewing. So that is one of my aspects. When it comes to the production of what we're selling, kombucha is what I am responsible for producing. And we're actually getting ready to start with our own coffee line as well. So you'll see me in those two things.
Okay.
If you look at our menu, that is where you can see me represented most, is in kombucha and in the coffee that you'll see. Other things that include, I'm also the social media, I don't even know, content creator as well as executor. I do anything that you see on our social media is what I'm handling on a day-to-day basis. I also handle all of our merchandise. I'm looking around. Anything that's branding related. I work with, we have a graphic designer that's a friend that designed our logo for us, but any replication of it since then has been me. So, yeah, gosh, I mean, it's funny as I look around.
Yeah.
If I had a title, I think I'd want to call it culture creator, because that's the thing.
Okay.
That's the thing
nice.
that's what. So I like to take responsibility for how you feel when you walk in the door or into my outdoor space, right? I want you to feel like you're in my living room, and I want you to feel like you belong here.
Right.
And so anything that lends to that, whether it's getting you here, whether it's the music that you hear on the speakers, whether it's the tone of the lights or what the artwork is or any of that falls under my care.
Awesome.
And so Matthew is sort of the visionary for the whole thing, and then I tighten it up and I make it really beautiful. And so so that's my role. Matthew and I are the only employees, so quite literally everything you see is something that one of our hands has touched. So anyway, it's all those things, but at the same time, creating the culture in here is what I like to take responsibility for.
Oh, that's great. And my personal experiences, and from what I've heard from a lot of people that come here, is you're doing a great job on that.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
go ahead and put that on your business card. That's
Culture
a
creator.
great
You got
title,
it.
by the way.
Thank you.
Great title.
Thank you.
So no, that's awesome. So out of everything that you do here, what's your favorite thing to do?
I love to interact with our people, right? And I will even admit that on some days when I'm exhausted, I don't do as well at that as I would like to, because and that's some of the cost of business, right? Is that some weeks my attention has to go towards other things that I'm not as good at as I am with people, right? But my favorite thing is to see people, both in the tap room, outside, however it is, interact with them, and build that relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that some of that is an echo back from Matthew's and my previous life and some of the other work that we have done, and so it rings true in this environment as well. As like I said, I like for people to feel included. I'm terrible at leaving people out. I'm terrible at it, which means sometimes there might be more people at a place than there should be, but I don't ever want anybody to feel excluded, excuse me. And so that's my favorite part is really the people and getting to see people and hear their stories.
Yeah, and I think as involved as both of you are, that really just has to kind of come along with the responsibilities of being here. If you're going to be behind the bar, you're going to be the face.
Yep.
You also got to be that person that's not sitting in a back room and
Yep.
say, well, yeah, I'm the owner, but you never see me. Thanks for your money. You guys are really involved. You're out talking to people. You're welcoming. That's the vibe that people do get when they come here. So that's great. Out of the beers that Matthew makes, which one's your favorite?
It's so funny. So a feature of our brewery is that we have rotating taps, right? So
Yep.
it really depends on what time of year you're asking me that question, quite honestly. So I'm going to look at our menu and tell you my favorite on tap right now is Veritas, which is a Belgian double.
Okay, nice.
That doesn't actually, it shouldn't be ironic that we were in Belgium when the COVID pandemic hit. And so we were trying and getting to experience all these Belgian beers and came back with this really new inspired idea of let's create some Belgian beers. Let's mimic that style. It's an older craft. It's very connected to our roots in the faith-based communities. Some of those
Yep.
monks that are making beer.
Goes back a long time.
It sure does. And so anyway, currently the one that's on right now that I love is the Belgian Double.
Great,
Veritas.
solid choice. I enjoy those as well.
Yeah.
So right now, obviously, you guys enjoy craft beer. You guys travel to different cities, and oftentimes you'll end up at breweries in those cities. So if we looked in your fridge right now, what would be sitting in there that's not a Knox County
That's
beer?
not a Knox County Brewing Company beer. It's funny you said that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's normally in there because I can't tell you what's in there right now.
Okay, gotcha.
So my go-to classics. I love Left Hand Milk Stout, especially in nitro. So what's so true of a lot of beers is the experience you have with it, and so it brings that nostalgic memory when you have it again. And I got to have Left Hand when I was visiting Colorado about 6 years ago. Some friends and family had rented a big house up there, and there was an outdoor hot tub in the middle of winter, and we had Left Hand, and it was just like, oh, this is really the quintessential Colorado experience. Quite frankly. And so that's one of my favorites. One of my other very, very easy to drink beers is Toppling Goliath's Dorothy's New World Lager. That's one of my favorite summertime beers. It's just that it's the beer that's like a good basic beer drinkers. It's clean. It's, it just reminds me of that early summer is when I want that one.
Nice.
And then I'm a huge IPA fan, so you can find just about any IPA because we've got customers that bring us stuff. I had one who brought me something from Eagle Park, which is in Milwaukee, that I had just had the opportunity to visit Toppling Goliath once again. I like their IPAs as well. And then we have a Founders Oktoberfest, which was stellar this year, I think.
Awesome.
I don't know if you had that one or not. But so some of those are semi-local, others are from really far away. I know I have a Belgian quad that's been sitting in there for about 6 months now that I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for that day. So it's pretty diverse, which of course, you would expect that from a brewer's wife. So it depends on the season, but those are some of my favorites.
For sure. Awesome. So still on the topic of beers, somebody that's never had a craft beer before, or maybe he's had a couple and doesn't care for it. Mm-hmm. How would you describe craft beer, either to get them to like it or to get them to try it?
So I think to get them to try it would probably be more the avenue I'd come at, because quite frankly, it's not in my interest to just try to twist people's arm to like something they don't necessarily like. But what I feel like craft beer has done for us is it was an experience, right? We started trying craft beer as a couple, but then the thing that really sealed the deal for us was when we were able to bring our kids in and have that experience with them all together. And so for me, I'll have people walk through the door and I'm not really a craft beer drinker, and I'm like, that's just fine. You don't have to be. Let's find something that you like, though, right? And so for me, it's that openness to try it that is most exciting for me, frankly, as somebody standing behind the bar, because it means they're willing to try almost like a way of life, and that's what I'm selling, is this way of life, this thing that says you can have the mass-produced version that's easy, cheap, quick to consume, and it won't do much for you at the end of the day. Or because the truth is, a beer is just a beer, right? But when there's care put into it, when I know your story, right, it makes that beer that much sweeter, and that can even transition into the palate, right? So I think when I have somebody who's standing in front of me that feels a little bit intimidated by craft beer, but is here because they've heard great things about the place, that's the most exciting new customer for me to meet. And universally, that's true. Because do I actually care if you like craft beer? No. But do I want to introduce you to what the way of life that craft beer kind of represents for me? Yes. And so that's the most exciting thing, I think.
That's a great take on it.
Thank you.
You bring that into them, and it's like, hey, you may not have good luck in the past, or you never had it, but give us a shot and see what you think. There's so many styles of craft beer, and I think you've had one, you may not like it. Well, there's going to be another style out there that you may just absolutely love.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes, and this may speak to your theme about women in brewing as well, the bar environment can be a little bit intimidating. And I think when, and then we feel like we've got to know what we're talking about, which also then is another form of this insecurity that's kind of funny for, I didn't go to bars when I was super young because I had kids when I was young. I had our oldest at the age of 23. So Matthew and I weren't the bar hoppers or clubbers or anything. And so I took to craft beer drinking and then just drinking alcohol in general with a slightly different take than what I think a lot of folks are introduced to it. And so you walk in and you feel like you have to know what you're doing, right? Sure. And a lot of people don't know that. And especially for women in a beer environment can feel really I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not even going to go, right? What if I hate it all, or what if the person's going to scoff at me for not knowing what I'm asking for, right? And so I think that is one of those spaces that it's really been fun to occupy as an owner here, because the truth is I still don't know all there is to know about craft beer, but I know what I know because I was willing to put myself in that environment, which then just goes back to that kind of walking through the door, giving it a try, and then seeing a friendly face in there. And so I think that's one of those exciting things where you can see a lot of growth in the industry for specifically is kind of contending with that intimidation factor that you might feel when you head in. So
agreed. No, great. So one more question here, which is kind of the epitome of what we're talking about today. So we've talked about kind of your background of getting into brewing. We've talked about some of your beers that you enjoy drinking. What kind of impact do you think women will have currently and in the future on the craft beer industry?
It's kind of a funny one because it's a global question, right? And I feel like I want to answer it, quite frankly, I want to say well, whatever impact men would have, right? That's my first response to that is it really speaks to, what women decide we want to do with this industry. If we want to let it go, if we want to let it be a boys club, or if we want to carve out our own niche, over here by ourselves, if we want to integrate. It's one of those things that I don't know if I know just a simple answer to that question, because there's a lot of different ways that we could go with this. What I can tell you is that here we are trying to carve out a niche for the family. And so it's not just about me, but it's about my girls, it's about my son, it's about anyone that they choose to marry in the future, right? There's this kind of pack mentality for us that is, we are in our family, we are skewed female because we have more girls than we do boys. And so my girls' impact on this can be every bit as strong as my son's and my husband's can be, right? And so as opposed for me saying like, this is what I think women will do to the industry, I'm interested to see what this family unit can do for the industry simply because all members are present, right? And I think that kind of goes a little bit broader out to this question about women because it means showing up, right? It means, and so I think that's the impact we'll have is if we choose to show up, we can really see what's been missing, because I can acknowledge that the beer industry is heavily skewed right now for men. And so I think the future is only bright in the fact that the more women sort of be okay with who they are in this industry, that we'll get to see that. And hopefully generationally, right? Like we'll get to pass this along generationally to our kids.
And I think women are showing up. So
Yeah.
the numbers I've seen, it is still dominated by men as far
Sure.
as numbers go, but there's a lot more women involved
Yeah.
in brewing than what there used to be
Yeah.
5 years ago even.
Yeah.
It's growing quite a bit. So I think women are definitely showing up
That's awesome.
in
Yeah.
the industry as well. So that is great. Sarah, thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Again, we're at Knox County Brewing in Galesburg, Illinois. Sarah Hansen, co-owner. Kombucha brewer.
That's right.
Future coffee brewer.
That's right.
And everything else in between. So thank you for tuning in to our Women in Brewing series. You'll be able to find this on craftqc.com as well as our social pages. And give Knox County Brewing a follow on Facebook and Instagram.
Knox
Twitter?
Cobruco, not Twitter.
Not Twitter,
I'm not
Facebook
Twitter.
and Instagram.
Yeah, Facebook and Insta.
And at knoxcobruco.com
Yep,
is the
that's
website. Or give them a visit here one day in Galesburg.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.